My name is Daniel Monroe, but out on the interstate, most folks just call me Big D. I've been driving this country back and forth for over 2 decades. From the cornfields of Iowa to the oil rigs of West Texas, from the snow-covered peaks in Colorado to the endless swamps down in Louisiana. I know every diner with decent coffee, every truck stop that won't steal your wallet, and every motel where the sheets don't itch. I know the road like I used to know myself before everything changed. But no matter how long I've been behind the wheel, nothing ever prepared me for what happened 4 years ago, just outside of Little Rock. At that time, my world was simple. I hauled steel beams, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. My wife Emily and I had just celebrated our 11th wedding anniversary, and our boy Lucasi was 8, full of questions and mischief. He'd sit in the front yard waiting for me to pull in, and every single time, he'd shout, "Did you bring me something from the road, Dad?" And I always did. A keychain, a sticker, a matchbox truck, something small, but it meant the world to him. Emily was my anchor. She taught kindergarten at the local school in Bentonville, always patient, always steady. She'd wake up early to pack me lunch, leave a little note, "In there, drive safe. Our hearts ride with you." She believed in God with a faith so soft and constant, it wrapped around you like a warm blanket. She prayed every night, kneeling at the foot of our bed, whispering the same words under her breath with her rosary in hand. And not just any rosary one her grandmother brought from Portugal. Blessed in Fatima, Emily called her Our Lady of Fatima and said she was a mother to all those who felt lost on the road. She gave me a small medallion of Our Lady of Fatima on our 3rd anniversary, told me it would keep me safe wherever I went. I wasn't much of a believer back then, but I wore it for her, hung it on the rearview mirror of my rig, right next to the little air freshener shaped like a pine tree. I figured, what's the harm? That summer, Emily and Lucas were planning a surprise visit while I was unloading cargo in Memphis. They wanted to spend the weekend with me, explore Graceland, maybe eat some ribs by the river. I didn't even know they were coming. My brother-in-law spilled the beans the night before. I pretended I didn't know anything. I wanted to act surprised, but they never made it. Somewhere near Jonesboro, a delivery truck lost control on the highway. Witnesses said the driver had fallen asleep, veered across the lanes, and slammed head-on into my wife's little blue Honda. It happened in seconds. Emily and Lucas died instantly. The crash was so violent, the engine block ended up 50 feet away. I was standing at a loading dock when my phone rang. A 501 area code. I remembered the exact ringtone. I answered, and all I heard was screaming. Emily's sister. Over and over again. "Danny, they're gone. Oh God, they're gone." I dropped my phone. The world around me froze. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I felt the coffee cup slip from my fingers and shatter on the concrete. Then I ran, left the shipment, left the truck unlocked. I drove like a madman to the hospital, praying, screaming, hoping they were wrong, but they weren't. The nurse at the front desk didn't even say a word. She just looked at me and shook her head. And in that moment, something inside me collapsed, like a bridge giving way under too much weight. I buried Emily and Lucas on a rainy Tuesday in a cemetery near Fayetteville. 2 caskets, one heartbreakingly small. The sky was gray, the ground muddy, and every shovelful of dirt felt like it was landing on my chest. People hugged me, cried with me, said all the things people say when they don't know what else to say. They're in a better place. God has a plan. But I wasn't listening. I just stood there, staring at those 2 boxes in the earth, asking why. Why them? Why not me? Emily never hurt anyone. She taught kids how to read, how to tie their shoes, how to be kind. And Lucas, he hadn't even lived yet. He wanted to be a park ranger. Said he liked trees better than people. Said nature didn't lie to you. And now he was gone. They were both gone. And the only thing left in my hands was that damn medallion of Our Lady of Fatima. Now cold and meaningless. I hated it. I hated everything it stood for. A week after the funeral, I was back on the road. Couldn't sleep at home. Couldn't walk past Lucas's room without hearing his laugh. So I drove. I took jobs I normally wouldn't. Cross-country hauls with tight deadlines, bad weather routes, dangerous terrain. It didn't matter. I didn't care. Somewhere deep down, I think I wanted something to go wrong. I remember a night in Utah, middle of nowhere. Stars bright like pinholes in a black sheet. I pulled over on a dirt road, ripped the medallion off the mirror, and threw it into the desert. Then I pulled the rosary from my glove compartment and hurled it screamed into the silence. Where were you? What good is a mother who doesn't protect her children? My voice echoed back at me, hollow. From that day forward, I refused to believe, not in signs, not in prayers, not in miracles. I became someone else, quiet, withdrawn, angry. The man who once helped new drivers back into loading docks was now the guy who avoided eye contact and lit up a cigarette at every stop just to keep people away. I grew a beard, let myself go. I stopped answering calls. Even my mum, even my pastor. I didn't want pity. I didn't want God. I wanted nothing, just the road and the emptiness it offered. It went on like that for years. I stopped counting the days, stopped caring about the calendar, until one night in the Appalachian foothills, everything came to a head. I was coming down a steep pass outside of Asheville, rain slick on the asphalt, my rig loaded with timber, and fishtailing on the curves. I had barely slept. The brakes started to give, and I felt that old familiar whisper of death in my ears. I didn't pray, I didn't scream, I just closed my eyes and whispered to Emily, "I'm coming, baby, save me a seat." But what happened next? I'll never be able to explain. I remember the sound of the tires skidding, the weight of the truck dragging me into the turn like a stubborn beast. I knew this curve. I'd driven it a dozen times. But that night, with the road slick and the load pushing hard, I didn't think I'd make it. The brakes were gone, not weak. Gone. I gripped the wheel with both hands and fought to hold the trailer steady, but I could feel it slipping, inch by inch, closer to the edge. The fog was thick, a kind of white blindness, and then everything went quiet. The music stopped. The dashboard lights blinked once and went dark. My breath caught. I saw the drop coming just a few more feet, and I'd be off the cliff, metal and bone tumbling into silence. And honestly, I didn't fight it. Some part of me was ready. But then, the impossible happened. With a sudden bone-rattling jolt, the trailer stopped. Just like that. No screech, no crash, no tumble, just stillness. I sat frozen, my arms numb, my hands stuck to the wheel like they were bolted there. I opened the door slowly, shaking, not trusting my legs. I stepped down into the mud and walked, unsure of what I was going to see. And there it was, a massive boulder-jagged, ancient, immovable lodged perfectly against the rear wheels of my trailer, holding the full weight of the rig, like a divine hand pressed into the earth. I stood there staring at it, heart pounding. That rock wasn't there before. I knew this road. I'd parked on this very curve months earlier and taken pictures. That stone hadn't existed. And then I saw them, half buried in the mud, soaking, wet, covered in leaves but unmistakable. The rosary and the medallion. The same ones I had thrown into the desert 2 years ago. The exact same ones. The same chipped bead near the cross. The same dent in the medallion's edge from when Lucas dropped it on the kitchen tile. My hands trembled as I picked them up, cold and gritty. My knees gave out. I collapsed into the dirt and sobbed. I wasn't crying out of fear. I was crying because something inside me had broken open. Something I thought was long dead hope. I sat there in the rain, soaked to the bone, cradling those pieces of metal and string like they were the only real things left in the world, and for the first time since the accident, I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel abandoned. I didn't feel cursed. I felt seen. I don't know how they got there. Maybe someone found them in the desert and followed me across the country. Maybe a bird picked them up. Maybe someone had the same set. Or maybe, just maybe, Our Lady of Fatima never stopped walking beside me. Maybe she waited for the exact moment when I was about to give up completely and said, "Not yet, my son, not yet." That's when everything changed. Not in a flash. Not in a chorus of angels or a beam of light from the heavens. No, it was slower than that. Quieter. Like a candle being lit in a dark room. I didn't start going to church the next day. I didn't drop to my knees and become a preacher. I just started listening. I drove into the next town, Hickory, North Carolina, parked at a truck stop, and I sat in the cab, rosary in one hand, medallion back around my neck, and whispered, "Thank you." That's all I could say. My voice cracked like a teenager. I didn't even know who I was talking to exactly, but I knew I wasn't talking to no one. After that, things shifted. The road didn't change. The weather didn't get easier, but I did. I started answering calls again. My mum sobbed the first time she heard my voice. Said she'd lit a candle for me every day for over 2 years. said she never stopped asking Our Lady to bring me back. I told her, maybe she did. I reached out to my brother-in-law, 2 old friends from the lot. I even called Father Michael, the priest Emily liked at the little chapel back home. He didn't say much, just told me I could come by any time. I did. A few weeks later, parked the truck behind the chapel and sat inside, on the last pew, didn't say anything, didn't have to, just breathed. I stopped chasing the most dangerous jobs, started taking easier routes, slower ones, places I'd avoided before because they reminded me of her, of him. Now, I wanted to remember. I wanted to feel something other than anger. I started leaving small tokens at roadside shrines, keychains, notes folded tiny and tucked under stones. I found a chapel in Tennessee, near Chattanooga, small, barely standing, with an old hand-painted image of Our Lady of Fatima on the wall. I pulled over one rainy afternoon, went inside, and sat in silence. That's when I met someone who reminded me of who I used to be. His name was Caleb, young guy, probably no older than 20. He was crying outside, sitting on the curb by his pickup, eyes red and face hidden in his hands. I didn't say anything at first, just watched from a distance. I could see that kind of pain. You don't have to ask to recognize it. Eventually, I walked over, sat beside him, and asked, "You want to tell me what's going on?" He hesitated. Then, slowly, he told me. His fiancée had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. Doctors didn't think she'd make it to Christmas. Caleb had stopped believing in anything, said it all felt like punishment for something he didn't even understand. I listened, really listened, and when he finished, I reached into my shirt, took off the medallion that Emily gave me, and pressed it into his hand. I told him everything. The accident, the rage, the desert, the stone, the rosary, the miracle, the voice I never heard but always felt. Caleb just stared at me, silent. His fingers closed around the medallion, and he whispered, "My grandma used to pray to Our Lady of Fatima. Said she was stubborn like a mother who won't leave your side, even when you scream at her." We both laughed a little, a tired kind of laugh, but real. A week later, he sent me a message. His fiancée had stabilized. Her numbers were improving. The doctors were stunned. He wrote, "I don't know what happened, but I prayed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was talking to a wall." That message stayed with me, like a signpost, on the highway. After that night in Hickory, I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I began paying attention. I noticed things again, not just the road or the signs, but people. A tired old man sweeping the steps outside a church. In Georgia, a mother in a rest stop diner teaching her kid how to hold a fork properly. A woman standing by a gas station phone booth, crying quietly into her hands. I saw them. I felt them. It was like the world had color again. After years of driving through shades of gray, I didn't become someone else overnight. I was still Daniel, still a trucker with too many miles behind him and a heavy ache in his chest, but the bitterness was loosening its grip. I no longer woke up angry. I no longer tried to outrun silence. I started stopping at roadside chapels again, not to say anything, just to sit, to breathe, to remember. One morning, somewhere along I-80, in Nebraska, I pulled into a rest area I'd passed 100 times. I'd never stopped there before. Didn't even know why I did that time. I parked under a dying maple tree and just sat on the bench out front. There was a small plaque beneath. It said, "For those who keep going even when their hearts are broken." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat there for over an hour, tears slowly coming down my face. Not sobbing, just steady, cleansing, quiet. I pulled the rosary out from the dashboard and started holding it, not even praying, just touching something that felt like home. From then on, I kept a journal in the cab, just a plain notebook from a gas station shelf. I wrote everything, memories of Lucas, of Emily, of the life we had, and the pieces of the life I was beginning to live again. Every now and then I'd write down a question I still didn't have an answer to, or a line of a prayer I barely remembered from my childhood. Sometimes just one word, "Why?" or "Still here." I even began answering people who asked about the rosary hanging on the mirror. It saved my life, I'd say. Some would ask how, others just nodded like they understood something deeper. But I noticed something beautiful when I started talking, really talking. People listened, not out of politeness, but because we were all carrying something heavy, and maybe my story made them feel like they weren't walking alone. There was a stop in Missouri where I met a woman named Lisa. She ran a little fruit stand near the junction of two back highways. I was buying peaches, and she noticed my medallion. She touched her chest gently and said, "Fatima's girl, right?" My mother prayed to her whole life. We got to talking. Turns out Lisa had lost a daughter in a car accident 5 years earlier. She said she still lit a candle every Thursday and talked to her like she was just in the next room. I told her about Emily, about Lucas, about the night on the cliff. She listened, wide-eyed, her hand pressed to her lips, and then she said something I'll never forget. "Maybe it's not about finding answers, Daniel. Maybe it's about not closing the door to the possibility that grace still wants to find you." I left with more than peaches that day. That phrase stuck with me. I started looking at people differently. Started imagining that maybe we all carry some broken part that still believes in being healed. Maybe faith isn't something you lose like a coin, it's something that hides when your hands are too full of grief to hold anything else. The more I shared my story, the more I noticed others did the same. At truck stops, at chapel pews, at diners off the side of quiet highways. One guy in Oklahoma told me he hadn't spoken to his son in 10 years. After our talk, he said he'd try. Another lady in Utah confessed she'd walked away from the church after her sister died of cancer. Said my story made her want to walk back in, even if it was just to light a candle and sit in the silence. It was like the more I gave away what had happened to me, the lighter the burden became. But perhaps the biggest shift came when I returned to Bentonville. I had avoided that town like a ghost avoids the graveyard. Couldn't bear the thought of driving by our old house, or the school where Emily taught, or the park where Lucas used to chase squirrels like they owed him money. But something in me told me it was time, not to go back to the past, but to make peace with it. I parked the truck outside the old chapel on a quiet Tuesday morning, stepped inside. The place hadn't changed much. The pews still creaked, the floor still smelled of candle wax and wood polish. There, in a side alcove, was a statue of Our Lady of Fatima. Emily used to sit right in front of it. I knelt, slowly, painfully, and rested the rosary in my hands on the bench. I didn't say much, just, "I'm sorry, thank you, I missed them." That was enough. That was everything. After that, I visited the cemetery. Emily and Lucas's graves were under a tree that had grown taller than I remembered. The grass was cut, the headstones clean. Someone had left fresh flowers, maybe her sister, maybe a stranger. I sat on the ground and talked to them, told them about the road, about the people I'd met, the young man in Tennessee, the woman at the fruit stand, the nights I'd cried into the silence. And I told them I was okay, not perfect, not fixed, but okay. Before I left, I placed the notebook I'd been writing in between their two stones, just for a moment, let it rest there, like a bridge between us. Then I stood, kissed my fingers, and touched both names. "Keep riding with me," I whispered. "You've still got shotgun." That day felt like a soft closing, not an ending, just a door I could finally walk away from without feeling like I was leaving my heart behind. I drove out of Bentonville that afternoon with the window slightly cracked, the wind warm against my face. I didn't play music. I didn't make calls. I just let the silence ride with me. But it was a different silence this time. Not the cold, bitter kind I used to run from. This one was peaceful, companion-like, as if the road itself had softened. Kept the rosary hanging from the mirror, same place as always. Now, when it sways over bumps or twists slightly with the curve of the road, I don't look away. I smile, because it reminds me I'm not driving alone. It reminds me that even when we throw away everything we believe in, grace can still come find us in the most ordinary, muddy, impossible places. I'm still a trucker. I still sleep in motels with bad curtains, still drink coffee from styrofoam cups and curse traffic in Dallas. But something inside is different. I stop more now, not just to rest the engine, but to breathe, to look around, to ask the lady behind the counter how her day is going, to help someone back their rig into a tight spot, and sometimes, just sometimes, to share my story quietly, like an old folk song passed from one heart to another. There's a chapel in Amarillo I stop by whenever I'm close. It's got chipped paint and crooked pews, but the candles always burn steady. I light one every time and whisper the same thing: "Thank you for not letting go." Not because I've become holy or perfect. I haven't. I still get mad, still say things I regret, still feel waves of sorrow wash over me when I least expect. but I've learned something that took me years of running to understand. Faith isn't about never falling. It's about knowing that, when you do, someone still calls you by your name, that someone never stopped calling mine, even when I cursed her, even when I gave up, even when I threw her out into the desert wind. Her name is Our Lady of Fatima, and she never stopped being my mother. She found me when I was broken. She held me when I didn't know I needed holding. She placed a rock at the edge of death and said, "Live." Now, whenever I meet someone who says they've lost faith because of grief, of anger, of life itself, I don't try to convince them of anything. I just tell them about a night in the mountains, a rosary in the mud, and a medallion that shouldn't have been there. I tell them, even when you give up on God, He doesn't give up on you. And if you're watching this, and you've been carrying your own kind of sorrow, your own unanswered questions, your own ache, know this: you're not forgotten, not by heaven, not by the one who prays for you in silence every night, even when you don't hear it. If you threw away your faith, don't worry, she'll find it, she'll bring it back, just like she did with me. Now, before I go, I want to ask you something from the heart. If this story touched something inside of you, if it reminded you of someone you lost, or something you once believed in, or even just gave you a moment of peace, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not because I need numbers, but because these stories need a place to live. And if you're still watching, maybe that place is in your heart too. Leave a comment below and tell me, what part of this story stayed with you the most? Was it the mountain, the silence, the stone, or maybe the way grace finds us when we're not even looking? And if you've lived something similar, if you've felt lost and somehow been found, I'd love to hear about it. Share your story, not just for me, but for someone out there who might need it more than you know. And lastly, if you believe someone you love might need to hear this message, send it to them. Maybe they're in their own kind of fog. Maybe this is the stone that keeps them from going over the edge. Let's keep this road of stories moving. Let's remind each other that faith can be quiet, that healing can be slow, but love never stops driving. Thank you for riding with me.